I'm Dr. Frank Renito, Chief Scientist with the Institute for Digital Transformation. I want to welcome you to Digital Dialogue, where different industry experts discuss digital transformation topics and issues that are of concern to all businesses. Whether you are already a digital enterprise, or on your journey, or still trying to figure out what that all means, we know you'll find something here for you. Remember, as a LinkedIn Live session, this is your opportunity to interact with these experts. Post your comments and questions in chat for a full interactive experience. Welcome to Digital Dialogue.
Hello, and welcome to another Digital Dialogue. I'm Jeff Tunn, author, speaker, explorer, and a fellow for the Institute for Digital Transformation. The Agile Manifesto and its methodologies have been around for over 20 years now. During that time, Agile has continued to evolve. It was born in the software development space, and it quickly moved to other parts of the IT organizations through practices like DevOps and other types of operations. As other departments throughout the organization began to recognize this change in the IT department, they also have adopted these agile concepts, sometimes almost organically. Agile marketing, agile finance, and more. And now we talk about an entire organization becoming agile. We're going to talk about this evolution, this revolution, over the next 30 minutes or so. Joining our conversation today are Aaron Koppel and Hans Giljoar. Aaron is the CEO of Project Brilliant, a company dedicated to business agility. And Hans is a digital advisor with the Nexer Group, and he is also focused on Agile. Welcome to Digital Dialogue, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, I want to get started with this talk of this evolution. You've both been involved in this throughout the last 20 years or so. Agile software development, agile marketing, and now agile business. Hans, let's start with you. And then Aaron, I want you to jump in on this as well. From your perspective, what is driving this evolution?
Thank you so much, Jeff, for this question. I think this is a very important question because when you start looking at Agile from a more historical perspective, my view is that it was actually driven to improve productivity and quality of software development. They very much adopted the lean manifesto or the lean principles for software development to improve, the value delivery of software development. And so we have one perspective where lean or agile was actually started from a more productivity perspective. But if you look at the last 10 years and what is happening in most of the industries is that we see an increased unpredictability in the market where companies need to pivot and respond faster to change. And there we have, in that perspective, we have more of an agile governance perspective to develop products and services more quickly. So it's twofold where it actually comes from the productivity and from the sort of rapid agile development part, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. That's good perspective on the start of this, and I agree. There's probably an inflection point maybe about 10 years ago or so. And I think one of the big things there that I saw was around that time, an article from Domino's. They had a new CEO that came in and declared, we're a technology business. We just happen to sell pizza. And so I think there's a recognition, and tying this back to digital transformation along with Agile is really, the two go hand in hand a bit. And so as we started to see that recognition that the companies are recognizing more about the technology and their products being technology driven or enabled by technology, that's a big factor in it. And add to that, in the last few years, of course, with COVID, a lot of things changing with people being more remote, a lot of opportunity for people to move around, and globalization of a lot of the work we do. And so that extends it as well, and companies trying to respond to that. And so really trying to become more agile organizations through digital technologies as well.
But I think it's really interesting. I mean, just a Domino Pizza sees themselves as a digital company is really revolutionary in many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think you are right. It was about 10 years ago, and Domino's was maybe one of the first. And now you hear it coming from Ford. We're not an automotive company. We're a data company, or we're a digital company. I find that fascinating. I'd like to back up a bit and see if each of you could just give a definition of what is Agile. So, Aaron, I want to start with you.
Sure. Well, I'll just give the one I usually give when in my training classes about Agile, which is that Agile is a mindset of iterative and incremental delivery of value through collaboration and continuous improvement. So a lot in there in that brief sentence, but it's a lot about taking things in small pieces. It's adapting. It's delivering value as you do it, but then it's also trying to continuously improve over time. And so I think that sort of wraps it up for me in terms of the mindset we're looking at. So here we go.
Hans, how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree that this is about mindset. It's not about process, roles, and other artifacts. It's about the complete company joining forces to stay relevant in a market of high unpredictability. How to actually compete in a new kind of environment. Because I think what Aaron actually talked about before is that when companies become more IT intensive and they enter a new kind of characteristic of a market where they don't have barriers of entry protecting them, they need to have different kind of capabilities, different kind of cultural leadership to actually be relevant in this kind of market. And that's where I think that digital transformation, but also agile transformation comes in. We need different kinds of governance structures, also in finance, to actually respond quicker.
Yeah. Well, we have a question from one of our viewers, Roy Atkinson. And Roy says, or asked, do any of you see a significant difference between agile, the methodology, and agile, an adjective meaning nimble? I'll throw it out to either one of you. Who wants to jump on?
I can start. So I think there's a difference. I think in the world, sometimes people call it, uppercase A agile, lowercase a agile. We refer to like the Agile Manifesto, which is when we talk about agile. Those that are in the agile space often are referring to that, and that's what we mean as the 12 principles and 4 values and things like that. So there's sort of and people view that as maybe the more formal version of it. And then there's the lowercase a agile, which is maybe more the dictionary definition of just being nimble and adaptable and things like that. I think there are probably differences in conversation with people depending on who you're talking to. But I think the underlying intent is the same, especially when you're applying it to organizations and teams and people, is that, really we are trying to be adaptable. And so, I think there's, depending on who you talk to, there might be differences in there, but I think there's an underlying theme that's pretty similar.
I just want to add there that, I think that agile methodology is very much connected to agile frameworks. Implementation of agile frameworks, for example, SAFe or similar frameworks, and it's a little bit defined by the purpose and objective of those frameworks, how they sort of work within that organization, by implementing their kind of governance and their kind of roles and processes and routines. Therefore, you are defined as an agile company, and I think that the other part being more fast changing or nimble is maybe the more logical business explanation to what agile is.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about methodologies and frameworks, then we get into very specific ways to implement the mindset, I guess is how I think about it, and versus sort of the dictionary definition being more about adaptable and nimble, which of course is the intent. It's just more about giving more specific about how might you go about that in a structured way and consistent way.
Yeah, you both have mentioned this mindset, this agile mindset, and I know in the realm of digital transformation, we talk a lot about mindset, and we specifically talk about the agile mindset. So, what is the agile mindset, and why does it seem it's so foundational to driving change in an organization. Hans, let's start with you.
I think that when we talk about agile transformation itself, I think the key word in that is transformation. I think the key to successful agile transformation is to get the whole organization aligned and committed to the agile principles or the agile cause in that way, meaning that the whole organization has to change. It has to see themselves as from a different perspective. It has to relearn about the logic of business, and that cannot be done by implementing a number of processes. It's about changing the culture, the way we lead, having servant leadership, having a different kind of culture, having different kind of visions about where we're going. I mean, if you look at Gallup's statistics or research showing that, I mean, 14% of the employees in Western Europe organization are committed and engaged at work. It's not possible to do an agile transformation in that circumstance. You need to create an environment where all employees, leaders, and managers are committed to change. And that is done by actually focus on mindset.
Yeah, I love that explanation. I totally agree with the culture side of it. That's a big part of how we approach it as well when we help organizations. And it really is about leadership. It's leaders are the ones who represent the culture and what's how we operate and what's okay around here. And so it's important to recognize that mindset shift is really about culture and behaviors. But I want to add one more thing to it, which is, oftentimes when we start thinking about, trying to put our finger on exactly what does that look like, or what does that mean, or what are the problems we see. What I find a lot of times is it's organizations that are trying to treat everything as complicated when things are complex. And simple, I guess, differentiation there. Complicated is there's lots of parts, right? But there's a way to put it together, and it's about being smarter. Versus complex is things are changing and moving, and it's about adaptability. And I think as organizations really, try to go towards an agile direction, oftentimes they're trying to do it with a complicated mindset versus recognizing that things are complex and they need to adapt rather than just be smarter. And so they can get themselves in trouble. And what the trouble I usually see is that they're really trying to make things more efficient, which is not really the purpose here. As we try to solve problems in a complex world, is about being effective rather than efficient. And so that's where we start to see the shift from lean, lean manufacturing, things like that, where we're trying to get efficiency, towards agile, which is more about adaptability in a complex environment. And that mindset shift is often not easy for people to understand at first, right? But I think as they get into it and start seeing that things are changing more and more rapidly, as they start paying attention to different metrics and different pieces of culture, then it can be more apparent to them how they need to shift that sort of mindset and approach.
I love that. Complicated versus complex. I think I'm going to steal that one, Aaron. That's a great quote. We got another question coming in from our listeners, and Richard wants to know: can we talk about the importance of the agile lean portfolio in dev and the service portfolio management ops and how they overlap? It feels like ops is missing from most of the DevOps transformation adoptions that he has seen. What are your thoughts on that? Aaron, let's jump to you.
Yeah, can we pop the question back up there again? There we go. All right. So talk about the importance of it. So yeah, I think from a service portfolio standpoint, I guess oftentimes when we're thinking about agile and DevOps being probably an extension of that in most cases, we're thinking more about the product side and the portfolio management side of what do customers need and really focus there. And maybe on the service ops side, I guess often viewed as more of a support service for the first purpose, right? And so as we think about getting teams together or ownership of prioritization, oftentimes it's maybe in my experience, oftentimes viewed as maybe a secondary tier that simply supports the first one. So it's maybe less visible to people that are not in the weeds with it. So that's, I guess, my initial thought of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with Aaron, and I just want to add a observation I made the last couple of years is that when it comes to prioritization, in regards to portfolio, that is something that most organizations are struggling with. I mean, how actually to get the most value out of your backlog or whatever you are prioritizing. We did the research a couple of years ago to see that approximately 30% of everything that is prioritized doesn't really bring any value. It doesn't really support the objectives and vision of the organization. And I think that is something that most companies need to improve. They need to be more accurate when it comes to prioritization and also be more agile and see that the criteria for prioritization will change over time. So there's a lot of work to do in that area. Definitely.
Yeah, just I think going back to the mindset again, that's maybe another key piece of that is really like extreme focus and prioritization, right? Companies try to tackle a lot of things at once, and so oftentimes get stuck and things aren't getting done. So really that mindset shift to if we can get one thing done, what is it? And let's make sure we get it done, right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to something we were talking about a few minutes ago that, again, you both mentioned it, and that is culture. When you walk into an organization, what are you looking for when it comes to culture that says this organization is ready, or man, this organization really needs some work on culture? I'll throw it out to either one of you, whichever one wants to go first.
No, but I think that what is culture, I think is something that's very difficult to define. But in essence, it's about how people interact and how treat each other and how they view situations and how they interpret situations in some way. And in some way, when you come into an organization, you can almost feel the culture in the air. You can sit in a meeting and sense how culture works in this organization. Is it positive or negative? And you can feel conflicts or confusion or friction within the organization itself. How do we do that? We actually do a lot of assessments. So we try to identify what are the friction, the confusion, and politics within the organization, and then try to mitigate it in some way. But I think the culture is, I would say, the most important part in getting the Agile organization to work in practice.
Yeah. For us, we'll often use different models and, like Hans said, assessments, but one of the primary ones that we found useful is the competing values framework. So not specifically necessarily a culture model, because culture is really hard to put your finger on, but it starts to articulate culture through the lens of values. And so what are those values for your organization? They're sort of competing ends of a spectrum in a couple different dimensions. And that sort of helps you put your finger on it a bit more to be able to talk about it and talk about the current state and what we want the future state to be. And, it's, as Hans said, you can sort of feel it. I say you can smell it sometimes when you walk in the door. But it ends up being a lot of things. And Jeff, back to your question about, can you tell when they're ready? I think there's, usually within a few days or weeks, you can really start to get a sense for how are things around here, and are they interested and excited for real change, right? Or are we trying to do more of a surface level, like we've got a surface level pain, we just need a band-aid, or do we recognize, hey, we need a new lifestyle, like a lifestyle change kind of thing, and that's where agile transformation comes in, I think, and so really through that we can start to really understand their readiness in terms of, can they follow through, can they successfully guide change that will last, not just a temporary thing that will maybe go for 6 months and then fade away when people lose interest or see the next shiny object. And so that's something we try to dig into, because the last thing we want to do is go in and disrupt an organization, and then they halfway through that change they decide it's not something they're interested in or not worth it, or they found something else they want to do, and now you've sort of overturned the apple cart and it's a bigger problem than it started with, right? And so really testing that is a good idea, right? And there's different models to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, one thing that I usually react to is when there is more or less a negotiation around different decisions and different policies, and those kind of negotiations can be a symbol, or can say quite a lot about how the culture in the organization works. Meaning that the people in the organization are sharing the same values, or attitudes. And it's difficult, especially in organizations when there is coming in different kinds of partners. I'm working with a construction company, for example, and during the construction process, there's a lot of third-party companies coming in with their deliveries and their work and the other parts. And whenever there come in new people, the culture is challenged, and there's negotiations about things. And in order to be productive and to be agile, you need to have a common culture that can withstand these kind of conflicts or these kind of new incomes.
Mm-hmm.
I like that concept, Hans, about when someone comes into an organization, there's kind of this negotiation of the impact of the culture, right? Because someone coming in invariably will bring their own ideas and their own concepts to that. I love that. We have another question here from one of the listeners. The difference between methodology and framework. I imagine that's a question you both get a lot as you are working with different organizations. So Aaron, how would you define that difference?
Yeah, I sort of use a Venn diagram for this when I do training classes. But so I think about framework being the rules of the game, right? So think about like a sport like American football or soccer. There are rules to the game, and all the teams that play it follow those rules. We all agree to them, right? And that's where the
we hope they do.
Yeah, I hope they do. And then there's process, right? The process is more like about the details of like what plays do we run or formations and things like that. And it's more specific and could be different per team, right? But we all agree to the rules of the game, which is the framework. And but when you have a methodology, the way I view that is you've locked in both of those things. So you're going to lock in the framework and the process, and everyone that's going to play that is going to do it the same way. And so oftentimes we'll see that in organizations that have implemented, for example, like a project management methodology. The intention is here's the framework and how you run it, and everyone's going to do the same way. And I view that as a methodology, a method that everyone needs to run, versus just a framework as the rules of the game, and you can figure out your own process. And so it's a little bit lighter in terms of just giving you guide rails and letting you be creative in terms of framework.
I just want to agree 100%, and I don't have anything more to contribute on that.
Well, Hans, I want to talk with you for a minute. I know you and I have had the privilege of co-authoring a book with some other fellows from the Institute for Digital Transformation. It's called Digital Transformation Demystified. And in that, your chapter is about agility, specifically business agility. And we touched on this a little bit when we talked about culture, but how do you know a business is ready for business agility?
That's a very interesting question, though. I mean, when we did the snapshot research with the Institute a few years ago, we sent out a questionnaire to, I think it was 60 companies, something like that. And the answer was that the Agile methodology was sort of in abandoned phase. And the problem was that many organizations cannot really get the value out of the Agile way of working. It's very difficult to get it to work in practice and deliver efficiency in an effective way. Those who have succeeded in implementing Agile transformation and getting it to work are going a little bit outside the boundaries of Agile frameworks. And they also focus on the change parts where they try to create some sort of business excellence, where they are more or less where people process and to interact in a sustainable way and without friction somehow. So they work very much creating the right environment for the transformation area. And I think those that succeed actually combine these two, the Agile frameworks and the business excellence, to get this to work in a more efficient way. So I think that is my conclusion on the whole thing. If you want to somehow improve the probability of success, you need to a little bit go outside the boundaries and look at a little bit more about the transformational part and the business excellence part in that.
Thanks for that. And Aaron, I'm going to toss this one from Richard at you. It should be on your screen there. What KPIs should we be measuring during our PIs in our sprints?
Yeah, I'd say the typical stuff that I would think about, especially in sprints, and if you're doing safe and PIs, biggest thing is probably value, right? It's sometimes hard to put your finger on that, depending on the maturity of how you've structured your teams. If it's they're just getting work done, it's a little bit harder. But if they're aligned to the business and really delivering something that customers would recognize every sprint, that's a little bit easier to measure value. Beyond that, there's other things that are maybe not the obvious stuff. And things like velocity and those kind of things, I would say can be very dangerous. I see those misused like 90% of the time in terms of a stick to beat the team with, and so those are not ones that I would usually promote. But it's probably more about our consistency and learning and things like that. Are we finding the problems that are in our way and actually talking about those and raising those up to someone who can solve them? And so those are the things, especially early on. And when I say early on, it's probably like the first 6, 12, 18 months. It really takes for a team to really gel and start surfacing those things and really having hard conversations about how do we get better. So I think that's the more important stuff beyond just value, right? That's probably the most important. Then it's about learning and having real conversations about what problems we face so we can get better.
I just want to add something there, because I think we also need to go back to why are we doing Agile in the first place? What is the point of doing this? It's not just about implementing a new framework for the fun of it. And it's very much about supporting business ambition, the business challenges, the business vision of where they want to be. And what I've done previously is actually to start understanding what are the business expectations on IT, on the software development, and trying to see if that expectation is fulfilled or not. So very much every quarter mapping the expectations and see how that is met as a way to show that IT is actually supporting the ambition, the challenges they have, and building more engagement with the business itself as well, where they can a little bit be in the driver's seat about how IT should work.
Yeah, and Aaron, I want to jump back to you. I know your company has been in business now for almost throughout this entire evolution of Agile. How has your messaging evolved when you talk to businesses today about Agile and digital?
Yeah, it's a great question. It certainly has evolved over time, and I would say partly because of the industry and market recognition of Agile's not just for software and Agile's not just for IT, but for us, that's where we came from as well, is a lot of those things from software. I was a developer long ago, and tied a lot to IT, but like we're starting to see more and more companies recognize that IT is an enabler, digital is an enabler, but really we're trying to get business results, right? And so a lot of the conversation for us over the last 5 or plus years has really been more about business outcomes, business results. What are your business goals versus how do you set up more teams, right? And I see, kind of back to the KPIs question. If you think about KPIs for a transformation, like one of the biggest mistakes we always see is measuring how many teams you've set up, right? No customer says how many teams do you have. They want something that's useful to them, right? So let's talk about that, business goals and value and things like that. So for us, the conversation has shifted a lot to look beyond IT and technology into the business, and that gets into product and marketing and those kind of things. I would say another part of it, though, that's maybe the obvious shift that people might expect us to talk about with business agility. But I would say the other big thing has been more focused on internally the employee, right? The employee engagement factor. Lots of research out there. Everyone knows the statistic about 70% of workers in the U.S. are disengaged, and that probably got worse over COVID. And so the real focus with Agile a lot of times is getting more teamwork, collaboration, and if you're doing it right, there's a lot more engagement from the people because they control more of their own destiny, right? It's more about give them a goal and let them use creativity to solve the problem versus telling them what buttons to push. And that sort of gives them the ability to step up and really be truly motivated by that challenge and the autonomy to tackle it. So I think that's probably two of the more recent focuses we've had is really that business outcomes and employee engagement.
I just want to add here that I've been working with lately with a healthcare company, and they want to do an agile transformation, which I think is quite interesting because they're not doing any software development at all. They're not IT intensive in a way. So I think the first thing we did was actually to discuss what is agile transformation, what does it mean for you, and what do you expect to get out of it, and that was quite an interesting discussion. Because they had different views about what agile was and how that would affect the organization itself. So it was very much, I think that is the starting point for if you want to do agile finance or agile HR or whatever, what does it mean for you? What do you want to get out of it? And start from there.
That's a great insight. So Hans just started working with a health organization during COVID, which was interesting. They're one of the few industries that didn't go home, right? So it was interesting because we had that same conversation, and one of the biggest focuses was that employee engagement, employee retention. People are getting burned out. Can this help, right? And I think it was a big factor in that initial conversation that led into the engagement. So.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. I want to go back. Roy, I think it was, asked a question. John or Frank, if you can throw that up. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. About communication. And I love that Roy put in the clarifier, quality of communication. So how important is quality communication when you're trying to do these transformations?
Is there anything more important? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, quality, that's brilliant. Quality of communication. So I think to me, that starts to lead into, it's not just what I often hear from leaders and their version of change management that might exist today is I'm telling people stuff, right? And that's not really communication, that's just announcements. And so what we want to do is really that quality of communication is having a feedback loop, having conversations, right? Two-way conversations. And for us, a lot of times it's getting into more collaborative situations where, it's maybe town hall-ish, but beyond that, right? Where it's more, collaborative in small groups. We use some techniques like open space, for example, if anyone's familiar with that, can be really valuable, where you're getting people together and talking about what they want to talk about, right? Which could be raising issues or problems or thorns in their side, or questions for management and leadership about, hey, what's going on over here and what's this mean, and raising those things so that they can get answers and be more engaged in the conversation, and also look for opportunities to help with the transformation, help with change, right? They can't help if they don't know what's going on. So that really being transparent and opening up that conversation to be two-way and really have that feedback loop going is super important.
I want to add two things. The first thing is that when you look at organizations today, they are quite complex. They are quite large. There are many hierarchical levels within this organization. And usually the vision of why we're doing this transformation or implement Agile comes from the top level. And for every hierarchy step downwards, the message will get diluted 10 or 20%. And when it comes down to the developers at the bottom who's going to execute this, or team leaders, they have often quite little view about why we're doing this, because the message gets diluted. So it's important for leaders and managers to amplify and continue to repeat the vision and purpose of what we're doing continuously. And as you said, having the feedback loops. The second point is that we see also in organizations that different functions, different units, different divisions have different languages. They have different way of expressing things and different way of defining things. And when we are trying to reconnect in value stream, we see conflicts between units that cannot really talk to each other because they have different vocabularies. And that is something that creates a lot of friction, frustration, that hinders us to be agile and to be productive. So we need to start working with having a common vocabulary or something like that to help out with that conversation and that communication.
That's brilliant. So I'm just going to throw a plug out there for a friend of mine, Ellen Gottesdiener, who I was working with one time, and one of the first things she does going into an engagement is start an organizational glossary. What do the words mean around here?
Oh, wow.
It sounds like such a simple thing, but it's tremendously important, because a lot of times, especially if you're a large organization, you might use the same words 15 different ways across the company. It's really important that we're speaking the same language, which sounds easy, but it's hard.
Well, a little shameless plug here from me also is I host a weekly podcast called Status Go. And one of the things that I do on every episode, I end with the same question. And I'm going to throw this question out to the two of you. We're about action, right? The listeners and viewers today have given us 35 minutes of their time, and we want them to take action from this. So what are one or two things that our viewers should do tomorrow because they listened to our conversation today? Hans, I want to start with you. What's a couple of actions they should go do?
I think the first one is really to get back to the vision, why we're doing this, really defining the purpose of why we're doing this agile transformation, and getting everybody to agree on that, especially on leadership work. So everybody has the same vision and purpose, so we communicate the same thing. The second thing I would work on is really to look at how good is the business excellence in this organization, business operations. How much friction, confusion, and bottlenecks are there that we need to somehow eliminate to get this agile thing to work. And the third thing, and there you have also the language and the different definitions as well. And the third thing is really to have patience. This is not a quick fix. This is not something we'll done in a quarter or two. This is something will take years to implement. So having a lot of patience in doing that.
Patience is important in these transformations for sure. Aaron, what are a couple of actions that you can provide our listeners, our viewers?
Yeah, Hans had some great ones there. I love patience.
Yeah.
So I think one of the big ones for me would be to just start asking why about a lot of things. And so, no one but the top level management can start a transformation. But if you start asking some questions, you can start raising some awareness to things that maybe aren't the way they should be around here, right? And so, it could be simple, right? Start asking, is this the most important thing and why that we should be working on right now? All the way up to, why are we doing a transformation? And just make sure we have good answers to those things. It reduces a lot of friction and confusion and really can get people aligned if we can all agree on the why. And that can start small, right? With little things, just start asking why. Take a step back, look in the mirror and start asking why. I think the other thing is really, a lot of education, right? So there's a lot of misunderstandings out there. We talked about vocabulary and things, but also misunderstandings just about frameworks and methodologies and all those kind of things. There's so many different frameworks out there, and even Scrum, you see people have different interpretations of what that is, even though it's all documented in a 13-page document that's easily read. But oftentimes people just don't take the time to read it and they make things up. And so I think getting the education to make sure you're understanding that perspective so you can be effective with it and consistent with the rest of the folks around you can be helpful. So.
Excellent actions as well. Aaron, Hans, I want to thank you both for carving time out of your day to chat with us today on Digital Dialogue. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you for having us.
For our viewers, if you have a question or want to learn more, we'd love to keep this dialogue going. Look for us on our LinkedIn page or visit the Institute for Digital Transformation's website and continue this conversation. This is Jeff Tunn for Aaron 𝗏𝗶𝗶 and Hans 𝗏𝗄𝐿𝐥. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you for joining our Digital Dialogue. Be sure to join our next Digital Dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.